Welcome to Peter and Phil's Courageous Conversations, a podcast addressing race relations and social issues in hopes that you'll be inspired to do the same. Now, let's begin our conversation with your hosts, Dr. Peter Weinstein and Dr. Philip Nelson.
Courageous Conversations, your place to learn and hear about the world from the eyes, ears, and mouths, especially, of myself, Dr. Peter Weinstein, and my partner, I can't say in crime because we haven't done anything illegally yet.
How do you know?
Dr. Philip Nelson. How you doing, partner?
I'm doing all right, man. I'm doing just fine. I'm trying to stay out of trouble, which really means just keeping your crimes secret. Welcome to our audience and welcome to Courageous Conversations. And we want to start out by thanking our sponsor nationwide, as well as our producer, Nicole Nelson, who also tries to keep us out of trouble and out of jail. Hey, so how have you been?
Like a hamster on the wheel, just running. Every once in a while, jumping off to grab something to eat, go to the bathroom and sleep, and then jumping right back on the wheel. How about yourself?
About the same. I'm sure I'm on different wheels because I don't get to see him much. But other than that, I think we can say that that's just life, right?
It is now. I mean, we live in a 24/7, 365 world that's constantly being influenced, disrupted, and it's just. I had my coffee with my friend Steve Ettinger this morning, and we were just talking about this. I just have this, and we've had this conversation as well, that there's this feeling of discomfort, of malaise, of uncertainty that is kind of overlaying the world right now. And, battles in the Middle East, battles in the United States, battles everywhere. And there's just kind of this nagging feeling that I go around with all the time.
I've had I don't think people want to admit this, but I think people walk around have had nagging feelings about society, global society, all their lives. I'm a Christian by religion. You're Jewish. I don't know if in the Jewish community, Armageddon is actually part of the prophecy. But if it is, that's enough for you to be worried about the future. That's enough to create a nagging feeling from time to time. And especially when people are drawing parallels between a historical activity or present news and prediction and historical predictions from our religious scriptures. So sometimes, I know you didn't necessarily mean that when you first were describing your nagging feelings. I know it was much more parochial and local, although it was also global. You can't help but look at the present fatalities that are being suffered in the Mideast and not think of the possibility of Armageddon. If you know your scriptures at all, you could even be an atheist and understand loosely the potential threat here. And there's nothing like a religious war that becomes overheated. This, House of the Dragons theme pales in ferocity to a religious-based war. But while you're sitting there talking, since we last talked, there's been a Republican and a Democratic convention. And I find it surprising that you think there's been a malaise in our environment when I think that there has been a invigoration of political spirit and a heightenment of concerns regarding some of the issues you mentioned. But then at the same time, my most present concern is about, I guess I have to relate it to the plan for 2025, that has been published by the Republican Party in email and now published in a book by the Democratic Party, just so we know what the plan was. And most of it is disinvestment of our votes. Most of it is about how we can either prevent every citizen from voting under the under the guise that all everything is fair in love and war, and we're being silently invaded by immigrants. So we need to prevent them from being able to vote, or we need to decertify their vote. And in the process, we can include anybody we want to include, whether they're immigrants or not. And so my question then becomes, what is the vision of democracy for people who can come up with plans like that? What is their definition of democracy?
So, a couple of things in there. First of all, maybe the word malaise is the wrong term, and in retrospect, it is. It's more of anxiety.
Okay.
Now, I am not a Christian, but if I'm not incorrect, you're talking about the Book of Revelations.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, see, look at that.
Look at that.
I actually listen, and although we have had 2 conventions, we're going through the most unconventional presidential election in recent memory because of the brevity of the actual campaigns between the current nominees, which will be essentially less than 100 days between the time of the conventions and the time of the ultimate voting in November. So it's a very interesting time. And your question about what is the definition of democracy, in my answer to you is a system of the people, by the people, all people.
Yeah, you didn't have to say that. That's kind of like Black Lives Matters, and everybody wants to respond, all lives matter. And the fact is that, well, actually, maybe you did have to say that, because the plan, the 2025 plan, essentially says we don't need all people to vote. We only need our people to vote.
Yeah. That's why I said it. That's exactly why I said that.
Right. The reason I say you don't have to say it is because the English language is pretty expressive. It's the English psychology that short circuits the English language. For some reason, and I don't know if this is how the law profession got started, but when you say democracy is a government of the people, by the people, we probably needed lawyers when somebody came in and said, well, everybody except them. We didn't mean them when we said that. It's just like our Constitution. Until they wrote in the words that slaves were 2/3 of a human being, or 2/5 of a human being. Until they inserted that, there were no exceptions to the people who were in pursuit of life and liberty. Those exceptions were created by after the fact and by negative actions.
And let's emphasize, Phil, that when we're talking about democracy in this conversation, we're using democracy with a little d, not a big D.
I didn't say Democratic Party.
No, but I know, but it's very easy to confuse the two.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't. If it is that easy, then we have failed in
civics
studies.
Civics.
And civics, correct.
Which we have failed, and we've said that for 4 years now.
Yes, well, if the failure is that fraught, I don't blame confusion between Democratic Party and democracy. As a matter of fact, I get confused about the small d and the big D. I think democracy should be the big D. But instead, most people apply the big D to the Democratic Party, which again is a misplacement of emphasis.
It is interesting because maybe the parties shouldn't be the Democratic and Republican parties, because the Democratic Party 160 years ago is more like the Republican Party was 160 years ago, and the Republican Party now is more like the Democratic Party was 160 years ago. So it is interesting to watch how the names, the terms, and everything else have kind of morphed over time, haven't they?
Yes, but that is because of the movement of the people and their opinions, right? The Republican Party happened to have a president that freed the slaves. And that president only did it for pragmatic reasons. That president evolved into a inclusionary political acceptance. He definitely, he believed that slavery was inhumane. Don't get me wrong. He didn't necessarily believe that Africans were his equal. It wasn't until he started having discussions with his kitchen cabinet that included intelligent African Americans that he began to evolve into an inclusionary position. And I'm not sure that when he died, he had achieved that without some equivocation with the way he was raised, because of the effect of slavery and segregation and the highest position that white men took over all other races.
So what's interesting, we can look at Republican Party with the capital R and Republic with the little r, and there's there's some subtleties in the difference of the definitions between a democracy with a small d and a republic with a little r. So if you look at them as nouns, they have a tremendous amount of overlap and overlay their meaning. But the parties associated therewith have moved further and further away from the definitions upon which they were created.
Well, I don't know how each party selected their name. I don't think that their names have any real relativity to the original term. I just think they just picked. I think they picked a mascot for a name.
But what about the donkey party and the jacket? I mean,
Essentially, I think the New York Giants is what they picked a giant for their mascot, because the Republic is essentially a term to describe a type of democracy. The Republic is recognition that it's logistically impossible for every person to vote on every issue and to determine the majority on how the majority's wishes that if we did that, we wouldn't need a Senate or Congress. But if we did that, then everybody would have to vote on every bill that comes up for Congress to determine whether it was going to become law. And to make it logistically feasible, we came up with a representative democracy. And that representative democracy is our republic. But our parties never attempted to adopt that detail of definition in their name. They just adopted a name. And the fact that
if you look at the history, it actually was the Democrat-Republican Party in combo that existed before the Democratic Party became itself, and it took 20 more years before the Republican Party actually was created.
Correct, because the Whigs was a party.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't know what Whig stood for. So again, to me, it's just another mascot. But even within those two parties, this two-party system, the Republican Party actually originally was more the conservative party in terms of budget. And they became the party of Lincoln when Lincoln was recognized as the Union South savior. It wasn't necessarily, and they used the fact that slavery was abolished more as a marketing tool than a tool of inclusion, that they actually believed in inclusion. Now, it was still acceptable to be segregationist in either party, but the most rapid segregationists were in the Democratic Party, because they'll be damned if they were going to celebrate the man that sent Sherman Jackson through the South and burned all the major cities during the Civil War. So the most ardent segregationists, particularly those in the Southeast, became members of the Democratic Party until Fannie Lou Hamer and the Jackson delegation that was fighting for integration and was primarily Black. When Mississippi sent that delegation to Chicago, to the Chicago Convention, and unseated the delegation that was originally recognized by proving that they had more Democrats voting for them than seated representatives, then there was a shift. And a lot of yellow dog Democrats suddenly became Republicans because they felt disenfranchised. As a result of that shift, the Republican Party became the segregationist party.
Dude, you got an A in AP history or AP government. I give you credit for that, my friend. I could not have put that story together.
You might want to check it.
Are we having to fact check our
Yes, of course.
now?
Yes, of course. I've seen some people in today's political theater just state things. Some of the things I've heard come out of people's mouths about their own qualifications, let alone history, makes you want to fact check just about everything.
All right, well, then I'll go to TikTok and see if I can get the answers. You realize that TikTok is the number one, is the Google for might as well find out what the next generation is the next generations are learning from a fact standpoint by going to TikTok and seeing what influencers are saying about democracy with a little d, Republican with a little r, and Democratic Party and Republican Party with capital R's and capital D's. And I do like it.
I will take you up on that assignment because I have a similar history to share. When we started our College of Veterinary Medicine at West University and used small group learning, we were encouraging, we required our students to find their own literature, to find the facts, etc. And at the time, Wikipedia was being established. It was looked at as a social experiment online to see if that sort of an online dictionary or online encyclopedia could decrease the time of transfer of knowledge. And the faculty and administration did not allow our students to use Wikipedia because it hadn't been tested and it wasn't seen as a sound source. Over the years, however, within 5 or 6 years, Wikipedia proved to be a very successful experiment. And I don't know if you've ever used Wikipedia recently or not, but you will find there's sources that usually that whatever is contributed to Wikipedia generally has a bibliography supporting the positions that or supporting the summaries that you see in Wikipedia. And we had to make a change and allow that as an acceptable reference material. Fast forward to when, what's her name, was the governor from Alaska.
Sarah Palin?
Sarah Palin. When Sarah Palin was running for vice president, and she told a different story about Paul Revere and who he was actually talking to or warning, etc. And when she was fact-checked, some of her people tried to change the facts in Wikipedia in order to be able to reference Wikipedia as her source. And the framers of Wikipedia began to monitor the information being put into Wikipedia for that purpose, for the truthfulness and at least the truthfulness and intent of the information that was there. Because anybody can go in and edit a summary, but you must document that you edited it, right? Now you have to document the references you're using to provide that. And it's okay and this is what we want to teach our students. It's okay if there are 2 or 3 reference stories about the same incident. Tends to give you a fuller picture of a historical incident. It doesn't mean that one of them was wrong or right. Usually the differences are from perspectives rather than actually happened.
Yeah, the number of listings on Wikipedia is freaking crazy. And it's impressive the information that they have been able to gather. And I just looked up Philip D. Nelson on Wikipedia, and I found out that you're a pro golfer and you're white.
Yes, that's right.
All right. So how did we get off on this? I do like the fact that we went off on a tangent, that we started off with a conversation on democracy and somehow ended up at the veterinary schools, which to me are not really a democracy.
That's not too far from Wikipedia was a democratic approach to gathering information.
A little d democratic.
A little d. Oh gosh.
So, democracy, of the people, by the people.
How is it by the people when you're generating practices and policies, and in some cases promulgating laws to make it difficult for some of the people to express their views.
It's these efforts to redefine who is the people.
Well, and I'm not just talking about decertification attempts of a vote after the vote. For me, that is the most offensive. After I vote, then want to block the counting of my vote. All right. But it is not much more offensive than you're making it difficult for me to vote, which is just a little more offensive than you're using a false premise to decertify my registration for a vote and to eliminate me from the rolls without informing me that you've eliminated me from the rolls, so that when I show up to vote, I'm no longer registered. When you add all those attacks together, it becomes an organized effort to eliminate a certain group of people based on either socioeconomic basis or race or immigration or all of the above, assuming that the contest is now just between white people.
Remind me of your dad taking you to the polling places in the late 50s, early 60s, where he had to go through a quiz and then guess the number of marbles in the jar or something like that?
Yes.
So what we're doing now is just finding another way of putting up barriers between an individual and their ability to voice their opinion.
Yes, but these are new techniques from old strategies.
Yes.
And the strategies, from old premises, I should say. And the old premise is that only white men have the capacity to vote intelligently, as if they are voting for self-preservation. But anybody else's self-preservation doesn't matter.
Now, if I remember right, one of our first conversations about 4 years ago said, I think we're going backwards.
In one of our conversations about 4 years ago, you did say that.
Isn't this representative of maybe not moving forward, but going backwards?
No, this is representative of not moving forward.
So basically status quo.
We can have that.
So status quo to 1960.
Well, it's status, yes. And the status quo, when you say status quo, the question is who's winning, right? In 1960s, the predominant atmosphere supported segregation. 1960, the predominant atmosphere was the diversity wasn't even in the nomenclature. Inclusion was definitely not in nomenclature. In the 1960s, there was much more redlining. Let's forget politics for a minute. No, that's still top politics. Let's forget the vote for a minute and let's look at housing. And let's look at how there's a reason other than just segregation that you had an assimilation of people with likenesses in appearance in certain parts of the city. And it wasn't because they trusted the people who looked like them. It was because they couldn't get loans to buy a house outside of that area. The banks were complicit in maintaining segregation. It wasn't just by law. It was by practice. There was an organized conspiracy, necessarily capitalism or a fair market. Certain houses had a minimum price that most domestics could not afford. And it wasn't just because they were bigger. There was an inflated price to make sure others didn't infiltrate the community. And based on a combination of that, banks could use that information and say, you don't make enough for me to loan you enough to buy that house that you want. That was part of the redlining.
Bill, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And that's frustrating.
Well, that just means progress is slow.
Glacial. And I just thought veterinary medicine was glacial in its progress, but it's not just veterinary medicine. It's a lot of other institutions that we have looked up to, been a part of, contributed to, been associated with. It's not just our profession, but it's a lot of other peripheral entities that we are engaged with, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh, politics. Politics make me uncomfortable and give me anxiety, which brings us back to probably where a lot of this anxiety is coming from that I mentioned early on in the conversation.
Yes. Well, it's coming from a bunch of different areas.
Right.
I agree. But, when I was a younger man, before I had children, I was married. My wife and I used to watch Notre Dame, the documentaries on Notre Dame. And they were so impactful on us. We considered not having children.
You'd have been a crazy cat lady.
Yeah, I'll watch it. I'm a dog person. I'm a crazy dog man. The point is that we were so into it that when he prophesied that the earth was going to end in 1999, and in their revisionist historical presentation showed how many of his predictions could have applied to the ascent of Hitler, the Second World War, and other things. By the time you got to, and in 1999, this is going to happen and the world will end. Our question was, well, if all those other things came true, maybe we should consider not having children. And I'm serious. That was a serious discussion for maybe 2-3 months for us.
Well, obviously you didn't pay attention to it because you got some kids out there.
Right. And we actually changed our mind. The alternative question was, and what if it doesn't end?
Well, remember 1999 into 2000, we thought the world would blow up because we were changing millennia.
Well, again, I'm in 1980 something, in the late 70s, when Notre Dame became a cult-like thing in the movies. The decision was our children should have every opportunity to avoid that forecast as anybody else.
I'm glad you got out of that cult.
Yeah, well, I wasn't in a cult, but
Yeah, you were. You were thinking about it.
I was listening to movies and I was applying it to my life. Yes.
But you probably, if the movie had been influential enough, you might have pursued other sources of information that would have potentially embedded you into that belief.
Might have, but again, questioned everything anyway.
Yeah, we still do, like everything I say.
Exactly.
So let's wrap it up, because I do think we've covered a broad spectrum of information, but I think I want to wrap it up with 3 words. You said it towards the middle of it when we were talking about Wikipedia. And apparently this is a Russian phrase, but it is trust but verify. And I think it is important to understand and do so when it comes to democracy with a little d, republic with a little r, democracy with a big D, Democratic
Party.
Democratic Party with a big D, Republican Party with the big R, and recognize that looking for the truth does mean doing some research and not just listening to TV shows on Nostradamus and buying into it, but making sure you do your due diligence and verifying what you're hearing. So I want to wrap it up with trust but verify.
Well, I love that, because one of the things I wanted to talk about today was trust and how we develop or decide to trust. Let me ask you a question. When you walk into a store to buy clothes, do you look for a certain type of person to help you get the right size shirt, the right size pants, the right color tie? Or if there were 4 or 5 people standing around the cashier not doing much, and one was black, and one was Hispanic, 2 are white, and one is clearly of Jewish descent somehow, I don't know. I'm just creating a scenario, and I want you to be honest with yourself. Do you lean toward one or the other? Or do you want the person who happens to be the freer? Or the first person that says, can I help you? And it wasn't the person that you might lean toward. Do you feel as if I wish the other person asked me first?
Do you want my honest answer?
I do.
First of all, I rarely go into stores shopping. Most of the stuff I have sent to me happens. So number 2.
You're avoiding the question.
But number 2, when I go in, it is whomever comes up to me first and says, may I help you? I don't care who they are. It really is, to me, I want to get in, get out, and get done.
Okay.
So I'm not looking for any one particular person except for the person who can provide me with the best service at that time.
And now I'm going to try to answer the question and say, taking that same scenario. First of all, I use a bad scenario because most men don't like to shop anyway.
Thank you.
So I'm like you. I walk in and I can't wait to make the decision so I can get out. However, I guess I was trying to set up to see what do you use to determine who you might pick if you had to pick among four people. I gave you the false equivalence of race to choose from. I tend to choose the person who's dressed like I want to dress.
So the woman. That's interesting because, honestly, I really don't go clothes shopping all that often.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, I understand.
And then personally, I like to just pick my own clothes or bring Sharon with me to help and ask her opinion because the one who I'm most concerned about how I look is her.
If I can, I didn't let you take Sharon.
Can I call my wife?
I didn't ask you to call a friend. I didn't.
Damn, you're making this tough. I thought we were wrapping things up at trust.
Yeah, I know.
Now we've gone off on a tangent here.
No, we didn't. We were talking about trust. And the point I was trying to make is the basis by which we tend to trust people.
Right.
We tend to trust people who are more like us. That's a natural bias.
Absolutely.
Right?
With the way they look, the way they act.
Well, yes, but sometimes we don't even understand we make those selections. So, for instance, you might have thought I might have said that when I walk in and see a black guy and Hispanic and two white guys, I'm going to ask the black guy. I'm going to hope the black guy comes and help me, right? But I really don't care if I'm looking for a suit or a certain style of dress. I'm looking for the person who can provide advice on my taste. That's how I make that decision, right? But I also know people who will walk in and say, there's a black guy, I might want to be his customer. There may be a number of reasons I picked the black guy, not because he's black, but because I want to help him out if I think they're on a commission or whatever, right? But we need to be aware of that subtle bias in how we make those decisions and how we trust their advice.
I would suggest trust is both a conscious and a subconscious decision. And it's built with biases and it's built with verbiage, actions, and the like. And trust is an entire conversation we need to have because I do think that our ability to trust in the current day and age in this American population is a huge issue. I think we have trust issues, and I think that's a whole nother conversation for another day.
I have no problem with that. As a matter of fact, I would love to have that conversation. Just think that without addressing the issue of trust, once you invest in trust, you can be blinded. Your objectivity can then be blinded.
Well, we call that blind trust is as dangerous as anything.
You can do all the research in the world. If you do not understand why you're trusting whoever it is you're trusting.
Absolutely.
Okay, you can wrap it up now. I'm sorry.
So what we started to do about 10 minutes ago was to thank our listeners, to thank our producer, Nicole, and wish her good luck in trying to edit this baby down, and to thank Nationwide for giving us a platform to entrust our listeners in our conversation. Whether you agree with us or not, we hope that you trust what we're saying and will look to join us at future courageous sessions. Thank you, Dr. Nelson.
Thank you, Dr. Weinstein. And thank you to the audience for listening.
Thank you for joining us for another courageous conversation. Be sure to follow us and check back next week for more.